Hello, happy Monday. It's August 14th already. Can't believe it. Where the heck did July go? But anyway, welcome to another video edition of Observations of an American Living in Germany. It's kind of a different subject today. It's in remembrance of August 13th, from what would have been the anniversary yesterday of the construction of the Berlin Wall by the German Democratic Republic, which was neither democratic nor a republic, but nevertheless, that's what they called East Germany. Whereas West Germany was I believe they called it the FDR, the Federal Republic of Germany. And the East German government, it was the GDR or the DDR, which is what the stickers on their car had. It was after the World War II in the late 1940s. Germany was divided up into four sections. They had the American, the British, and the French sectors, and they had the Soviet sector. Basically, the Soviet sector would later become what was known as East Germany, and the American, British, and French sections became West Germany, which was capitalist, while East Germany was communist. And Berlin was the capital. So I believe it was the Potsdam Treaty, if I'm correct, they had the capital, West Berlin, and East Berlin were divided. West Berlin was the Allied German, French, and American sectors, whereas the former ally, the Soviet Union, controlled the eastern part. So they divided the city up, but the city was seated in the center of almost in the middle of East Germany, but it was the capital, so that's how they divided it. Anyway, the Iron Curtain went up in probably 1947, which included the satellite countries of East Germany, Czechoslovakia, what's now, I guess, the Czech Republic and Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, I guess Yugoslavia. I may be missing another one or two of the Balkan countries. Yugoslavia is no longer, that's been divided, but nevertheless, the so-called Eastern Bloc, the Warsaw Pact countries, Poland, nevertheless, Germany was divided, but the communist government put up fences and walls and guards and everything to prevent people from fleeing from the East, where it was miserable under communism, to the West, which was thriving under what they called modern capitalism in the 1940s. Well, a lot of people couldn't cross the border between East and West Germany, but a lot of East Germans would go into West Berlin, and then they would fly or catch a train to West Germany to freedom. Well, the East German government and the Soviets, who were actually controlling them in many ways, decided they had enough of this. So on August 13th, it was basically a Saturday night into a Sunday morning, they took many prefabricated sections of walls, cinder blocks, barbed wire, and whatnot. The East German police and the East German military and the Soviet military, they all combined and they built this wall. It went right down the middle of the city. And sometimes a building would be on the east side, but the sidewalk in front of it would be on the west side. They tore up streets, they blocked railroad crossings and everything else. And all of a sudden, people were trapped. Many people died trying to escape communism into the west side. Well, nonetheless, this commemorated the 1961, so it would be the 62nd anniversary. But anyway, the Berlin Wall stayed up until I believe it was 1989 is when they announced that people could cross freely, and then I believe Unification Day, if I'm correct, was October 3rd of 1990. That's when Germany officially, I guess the Cold War was considered over, and it became one Germany again. So the the states in Eastern Germany became one with West, and it did take a long time to recover. When I was a child, I was about 8 or 9. My dad was stationed in Germany. We took what's called the duty train from I believe we left out of Frankfurt. We lived in Garmisch. I think we left out of Munich or Frankfurt, and we had to stop at the East German border to switch from an electric locomotive to a diesel because the East Germans didn't have electric lines. And we're sitting on this train, and there's Russian guards walking around with machine guns. And my father, who spoke Russian pretty decently at the time, he was a student learning it, he had, I guess, found a way to give some cigarettes and some mini bottles of whiskey to the supervisor of the guards. And that got the train through there a little quicker. But I remember in the west side, everything was lit up. We got in the east side, and it was all dark. You might see a porch light, hardly any cars at any railroad crossings or anything like that. And we made it to Berlin. We stayed with some friends. Several years later, I was in high school. I guess it was 1981. I was 16. And we drove from Garmisch to Berlin, but we couldn't go the most direct route. We had to go up, I believe it was Helmstedt. If I'm saying that incorrectly, I apologize. I believe it was Helmstedt, Checkpoint Alpha, and we had to follow a particular route. We could only get fuel at a certain place. My dad had to check in. And then when you get to the border of East Germany into West Berlin, they had another checkpoint. I guess that's Bravo. And you had to check in there, and the border guards on both sides would look at your papers and let you go. And we stayed with friends in West Berlin, and then when we went into East Berlin, we went through the famous Checkpoint Charlie. And that was pretty weird. The east side was like all gray, very few cars. They were mostly Soviet-style cars. I guess like the Trabant, little, they were like dull gray or silver or white. You didn't see a lot of BMWs and Mercedes and Porsche and all that stuff. The buildings were kind of drab and dismal looking. But when we came back, we had to go through the same thing at Checkpoint Charlie. And I believe there's a checkpoint. There was on the east side when you left, and then there was like a no man's land, and then you went into the west side. And I know that was a long time ago, but that helped steel my resolve and my hatred for communism and other totalitarian regimes. These people were literally enslaved by their own government. And I know maybe it's different to Germans or whatnot, but you had a nation that was divided after a war, and half the people were allowed to live one way and half were allowed to live the other. And even though they were the same people, it's not quite the same as the situation with Korea. That was a whole different animal, but they see themselves as two different nations. But with Germany, they were one people divided against their will by the Russians who wanted them under communism. But yeah, that was just something I remembered. I saw a little bit about it on the internet, on the news, but if you want more information, a lot more than I'm going to be able to tell you, but you can go to history.com. It's the website of the History Channel, and they have a lot of pictures of people who were able to escape through tunnels and fake trunks and vehicles and rappelling out of a window from the east side down into the west side. Several people have been shot. It was really a horrible legacy on the German people. Of course, it wasn't really the fault of the German people. Well, you could argue that they got in the war and that was their fault, but nevertheless, they lived under communism for decades. And the Berlin Wall, how they did that so quickly, people got on the wrong side and that was it. They were toast. And eventually, I remember I was about 24 years old when the thing came down. I was watching it on the news and the people pouring out in the street, drinking beer with each other. I thought, man, that was cool. That must have been a hell of a fun time for those of you who are Germans, if you were alive back then. It doesn't seem that long ago. 1989 just seems like, 10 years ago, but it wasn't. I guess that's a thing about getting old. But anyway, that's enough rambling for now. It was just my I guess you could call it an observation from what I've read and then from what I recalled when I was over there as a child. I also remember we stopped for gasoline somewhere when I was a teenager and we drove, and my dad was getting gas in the car, and the guy was out there, the attendant, and he wouldn't talk to him. I said, Dad, why is that guy being mean? He said he's not. He's afraid that the Stasi are watching him. The Stasi were the East German secret police. Just think of a communist version of the Gestapo. But, they didn't want to be seen talking to an American. But yeah, we had to follow a certain route, and you couldn't deviate from it. It's hard to believe that that kind of stuff happened in our lifetime, you know? So, for those of you who are younger out there in college and you think socialism and communism is the best way to live and that, capitalism is bad, I wish you could have seen some of the things I saw when I was there in my youth. Communism looks great on paper, but doesn't turn out that way in the real world. And spare me the, oh, but that wasn't real communism stuff, because that's how it does end up. It always ends up that way because it doesn't work, so your smart and productive people always seek to leave, and the regime can't have that. So, in the United States, we have a big argument over whether we need a wall to keep people out from coming in there, but with communism, they always need walls to keep people in because they don't want people leaving. So, anyway, that's just my 2 cents. Hope everybody has a good night, and can't believe it was that long ago, 1961, when the wall was put up. Anyway, peace.